Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Flight School Connector. This one's called Valuation, Substantiation, the Value of Customer Insights. So today, my name is Chris Moser. I'm the Senior Director of Flight Training Education here at AOPA, and I'm really happy to be joined by Michael Hangartner, my colleague. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I currently work in You Can Fly's high school initiative, writing curriculum. But prior to this, I've had a chance to work in a variety of different areas, including research and communications and marketing. And I've had an opportunity to do some consulting for flight schools within those areas as well. So I'm really excited to be here.
And in fact, I even know that you did for one of your projects on your, I think it was your master's degree, if I'm not mistaken, a whole flight school, you think it's a business plan, the whole deal, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're looking forward to having you on, and I appreciate you being here. And not to mention, we've got Stephen Schroeder behind the camera, who is our coordinator of the Flight Training Initiative. Say hi, Stephen.
Hello, Stephen.
Hopefully you can hear him. He did say hello, and you can always contact either me or Stephen. We'll see the email at the end. So let's get right into it here. Actually, before we get right into it, I should say, want to thank our sponsor, Sporty's Flight Training Courses. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and throw on this great hat that Sporty's provided. Sporty's Flight Training Courses, it's the Flight School edition. So if you are looking for some great syllabi, whether it's for private, instrument, commercial, they've got courses and syllabi available to you, including flight school discounts with low minimums, as it says right there. So anyway, check out their stuff. They've got really great resources, iPad app, the Android, smart TV, anything that you might need in helping your students get ready for their check ride. If you'd like more information on that, you can see the information on the screen, but you can always contact Mark W. at sporties.com to find out more. Okay, so I know that today we're going to be talking about the customer value. Michael, tell us a little bit more about where we're headed.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a couple things today. We're going to be looking at how flight schools can better understand what exactly their customers need and what they want, and then also ways that they can use that customer insight to better create value for their customers.
And I know that we're hoping this is going to be the beginning of a bit of a series, so we're going to look into this and really find out about this customer value concept mainly today, and then hopefully in the future we'll be taking that and driving it forward with even more tools that flight school owners can use.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so this first part, I know you've got a big definition up here. Can you tell us a little bit more maybe? And I know you've got a really good way of explaining this idea of customer insight.
It is a big definition. And if you read everything that's on the screen, it's going to seem like really a mouthful. But at its core, customer insight is actually much simpler. It's simply taking psychology and more specifically, human behavior, and using those disciplines to better understand what your customer wants and needs, and then finding ways that you can create value from that.
And I think one of the key parts that I know that we're going to discuss later too is that flight school owners and flight training has a lot to offer people, but maybe we're not always as good as we'd like to be at potentially communicating that to them. And so in this idea, you're going to help us first figure out, well, what is it that our customers would like? And that way we can see, hey, does this match up?
Right. It's all about the ability to place yourself in your customer's shoes and to view your business as they see it. And that'll really help you discern what they find most valuable about your offering.
All right, let's get into this. I'm excited.
All right.
So 3 questions that we should be asking when we're trying to find this out. So tell us about this.
Yeah, in order to figure out how you can provide more value for your business, the 3 questions that you're going to ask is first, who are your customers, or who would you like them to be? And then what do your customers need or want? And finally, how do your customers go about making a purchase? What's the process that they go through as they research different options and finally settle on one?
And I know that, like, again, as we mentioned, there's going to be some stuff coming in the future for some of these parts of the tools of it. But today, the main focus is on...
Today, we're really going to focus on these first 2 questions as far as who your customers are and what do they want and need. And that's really what's wrapped up in this idea of customer insight.
All right, let's check it out. So we got an equation. Now, I taught economics as well, so we love equations when we get into this stuff. Explain this one to us.
I thought this one would make you happy. Yeah, that's why I included it. No, it is always important to define these terms that we're going to be throwing around a lot during the conversation, and one of them is customer value. So the equation that defines customer value, which they can see on the screen, is the value in a flight school, or really any firm's offering, minus the customer's cost to secure it, equals the customer value. Now, one really important point to remember here is that the customer's costs to secure it are not just monetary. We aren't just talking about what a customer is paying per flight hour.
Right.
It also includes the time that they have to invest, any stress or emotional costs in the learning process, or even opportunity cost. I mean, I know you know from economics, anytime we make one decision, we're necessarily saying no to something else.
Right.
And so that's something that is also factored into that idea of customer costs.
Absolutely. And in fact, I want to reiterate that point because I think it is so important that it is a non-monetary. There are all these things that there's an explicit cost in terms of what you pay. But if you can somehow also take into account these other things that this customer is giving up, like their time, that's a way, and I know that you mentioned earlier when we were discussing this, how can we, obviously we want to try to increase the value, but you had a really cool concept of saying, what can we do to increase value by lowering costs?
Well, and that's the interesting thing when you write it out as an equation like this, is you realize there are actually two ways that you could improve your customer's value. First, you could increase the value in your offering, or at least how customers perceive it.
Right.
And the more that you're able to do that, whether it's through better instruction, better aircraft, something that differentiates you, that creates value that customers don't see somewhere else, that's going to increase their overall level of value. At the same time, you could also increase customer value by finding ways to reduce their costs on the other side of the equation. So that might be something like lowering your prices per flight hour, but it could also be just finding ways to accelerate their training so that they aren't having to spend as much time or as much money in the long run.
And perhaps it could even be things like efficiencies, right? Maybe it's in paperwork or time spent in scheduling, having the right front desk staff, just reducing any kind of weights and things like that are going to lower their costs, thereby increasing the value they're perceiving, right?
Exactly. I mean, another one of those things that was wrapped up in those costs is any frustrations that a customer might ever feel.
Right.
So anytime that they aren't standing around waiting for something or experiencing downtime, that's going to increase their value as well.
And the only other thing I know on this that I was thinking about as well is that as flight training providers, as a flight instructor, as a flight school, we inherently feel a lot of times the value. It's the reason that we do it, the reason we became pilots. But there's going to be some value in that ability to be able to express that, which we'll talk about a little later, I know.
Right.
But that idea of making sure that we find ways to really get that across.
Absolutely. And that's an important concept as well.
Cool. All right. Well, now we've got this idea of benefits and value. So tell us more about this, Michael. What can we do here?
Well, this really goes to what you were just saying, and the fact that in order for value to be created or experienced by customers, there are really two essential parts. So first off, flight school needs to be able to make offers that are going to satisfy that customer's needs. Mm-hmm. But then they're also going to be able, or going to have to be able to communicate what those offers are. And both of those points are equally important. I mean, you can have a flight school that has an incredible offering. I mean, you might have the lowest prices in the state with incredible aircraft, good flight instructors, and yet that value isn't really going to be realized by customers if they don't know about it.
Right.
You have that old philosophical problem of a tree falling in the woods, but no one being there to hear it. If your flight school has an incredible offer to customers, but they don't actually know about it, there's not going to be any value realized. On the other hand, it's also important to be able to have an offer that customers see as valuable. You could be a flight school that really has this marketing thing well at hand, and you're good at communicating with the people you want to communicate with. You're good at selling all that you have on offer. But if those aren't things that a customer ultimately finds valuable, it's really not going to matter.
So the key is knowing and being able to express that idea of value, or especially in terms that customers can understand. But then the other really key part is then being able to properly communicate that so they know about it.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And those are both key.
Absolutely. All right. So we've got a few more terms that we want to understand here. And so tell us a little bit about this idea, because this is kind of interesting. And I know that a lot of times it seems like we as flight training providers can get caught up in especially this idea of features and attributes and kind of miss out on the value part.
And not just flight schools. Really, so many businesses across the board can get caught up in this. But just defining terms quickly, if you look at what features or attributes are, those are the elements or functions that a firm is going to build into its products or services. So those are the more specific, detailed oriented things about an offering. Whereas benefits, those are the things that are actually solving a customer problem or answering one of their needs.
Right.
And values go even beyond that in scope, and those are the things that are really going to benefit consumers. So the more that you can stop thinking in terms of features and attributes, I mean the specifics of whatever aircraft you're offering, or anything else that is very detailed, and start thinking more in terms of what is providing the value that your customers are really getting in their minds, the more that you're going to be able to sell to them effectively.
And I think it probably, and as we're going to see, because I know you're going to provide some really good examples for us to work with this, but I think in terms, it's usually easier for people to come up with these features and attributes. It's a little more difficult and requires a little bit of thought to get to this idea, to discern, as you mentioned, this value idea. So I know you've got some good examples coming, so let's maybe get into that.
Sounds good.
All right. So first, wait a minute, I recognize this. Let's take a closer look at this slide. So of course, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Any of our CFIs out there are going to know this from your fundamentals of learning. I was also a school teacher for a long time, so very much learned about this. And I know in terms of education, you might be wondering, what the heck is this doing in one about running a business? And of course, in terms of education, we know that if the person that the student or the learner's need is not met in the terms of being, obviously able to breathe or eat and have slept and so on, or not feeling safe and secure, then they'll never reach these higher levels of learning where they can self-actualize, if I could say that correctly, self-actualize.
It's easy for you to say.
I know, no kidding. Or you just build that self-esteem. So, but how do we apply this to what we're talking about today with this customer value?
Yeah, we can apply the same model, but in a different way. I mean, just as it's useful in teaching students how to fly, because as you alluded to, you're going through these different levels to help them learn, it can also be used by a business in order to really find the different areas that they can provide value. So the easiest way to visualize this might be an example. So starting, say, at the safety and security level, what are some things that a flight school could offer to students or offer in its messaging that would make them feel more safe or secure? Well, you could speak to how well maintained your aircraft are, or the procedures that you have in place, how well your pilots follow safe procedures and checklists. You've also got the level that's above in belongingness. So what are some ways that your flight school could really speak to this and add value? Well, you might have programs outside of just the flight training that you provide, where you have ground school study sessions for your students, or pizza parties, or tours of the local tower, things that are going to make your students feel that sense of connectedness with the other students.
Right, and it's that same concept of community we always talk about in the flight training experience research and so on. So yeah, getting them to feel like they belong to something.
Exactly,
Right.
That's
Perfect.
very valuable to students. Going one level up, then you have self-esteem, and this is something that I feel like is very important, or that all pilots are going to understand at a very intuitive level, because I think that a lot of us feel this. There's something about being a pilot or learning how to fly that gives you more self-confidence and just makes you feel like a bigger deal. I know that there's the old joke that we know that how do you know a pilot's at a party? Well, he's already told you.
Exactly.
And that's just a good way of illustrating this idea of how it leads to our greater self-esteem. And then above that is self-actualization. And if you can find value there that you can offer to your students, they are really going to latch onto that, because that's the most important. So maybe you're playing into this idea that flying is something that they always feel like they've been meant to do. And that's something that your flight school can offer them. Or maybe it's just that they feel like flying is the epitome of freedom.
Right.
That it allows them to go where they want, when they want, and more freedom than they ever had before. That's another value that you could really speak to as you're marketing to people.
And I think a lot of us as pilots will likely understand that part of it too, that kind of being almost called to wanting to be a pilot in some terms.
Exactly.
The thing that I really think that I feel like I'm getting from what you're saying as well is that in education we talk about you have to build your way up to get it, but in almost what you're talking about is you can actually get equal value to build customer value, to not try to use value too many times, but you can build that. But all of these are important. So you can call to all of these in how you're trying to communicate with your customers.
They are all important. Exactly. It shouldn't be thought of strictly as a hierarchy in this case, but a way to find value in different areas. though the hierarchy is, of course, still going to come into play in some ways.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter what cool activities you're going to be offering for your students if every time they get into one of your aircraft, they feel like their life is in danger. So
Very true.
So it's still going to be necessary to address some of those lower values first. But yeah, the overall goal of this is just to find different unique ways that you can create value for your
I
customers.
see a lot of opportunity here. So, all right. So you've got this idea here, this feature benefit value ladder, which is a sort of another hierarchy. Tell us kind of what's the rundown here? How do we use this? And I know you're going to give us examples afterwards.
Yeah. So the feature benefit value ladder is a way to work your way to the ultimate value that your students are getting from the features and attributes that you might be offering. And as we said earlier, a lot of time the tendency for businesses is to focus way too much on the features and attributes, even though that's not why someone is going to choose you over someone else. And it's important to remember that as well as you're communicating with your potential customers. You always want to keep your customer in mind,
right,
and what they actually know, as opposed to what you know as someone who's already immersed in aviation. As you know, in aviation, there's nothing that we like more than coming up with acronyms or jargon that we can use. But if you have someone off the street who's not yet started flight training, a lot of that is not going to mean anything to
right,
them. So just as an example, I know that you have worked very closely with a lot of flight schools,
right,
calling them, talking to them, going online and looking at their website. If you go and talk to them, or if you click on their website where it says aircraft, what are the things that you're typically going to find?
Typically what you're going to find, a lot of times we make these phone calls and like you said, talk to them. One of the big things we find is that you ask them about what kind of aircraft do you have, and then they'll start throwing out things like Cessna 172, and it's got a GTN 730 in it, or whatever type of GPS and a Navcom and this. And of course, for someone who's a pilot, that's good information. But as you mentioned, for someone who's brand new that's never flown before, that means nothing.
It's just not going to mean anything to you. It's going to go right over your head. It's much better to frame some of these things in a way that those students are going to understand, or those people who have not yet started flight lessons. So maybe instead of just pointing out the avionics that your aircraft has or how much fuel it holds, draw a picture in their mind of what that really would mean to them. This is an aircraft that you could take several states to go visit family.
Right.
Or this is an aircraft that would be perfect just for taking a friend and doing some local sightseeing, painting those kinds of pictures in their mind.
Exactly, and I love that idea that you're talking about of just making those kind of simple things to help them. And in fact, I know the best schools that we talk to, the award-winning ones, consistently every year do exactly that. When you talk to them on the phone and they talk about it, they talk very much in those kind of terms. So they've got the right thing. So I think it's a good recommendation.
Oh, thanks. And so going back to this ladder and finding the ways that you can ladder your way from features to the value that you offer, I think the easiest way to show it would be to go through an example. So on this next slide, you'll see.
And let's take a closer look at this slide so we can see the details there. Go ahead.
So you start with some of the features that your flight school might be able to offer. Well, maybe you feel like your core strength is your flight instructors. Mm-hmm. They have a wide range of different industry experience. They've done a lot of different types of flying, either corporate or in the airlines. And so that's really a strength that you have. Well, that's a feature. But what benefits then is your student going to get? Well, if you look at the next benefit up, your students are going to learn not just how to fly a plane well, but they'll also get a good education when it comes how to practice aeronautical decision-making,
applying
or ADM.
Right? Yeah, using it that way.
Applying it, exactly. And so what's going to come once your students know how to practice good ADM? Well, the next benefit up, the next higher level benefit, would be that they feel more capable of making decisions when they're out on their own. And what is this capability going to lead to? Well, then it's going to end up with students that are more confident all around. Mm-hmm. And that's really the value that they get. And that can even lead to something you feel in other areas of your life. I mean, I think you would agree that learning how to fly doesn't just make you more confident as a pilot, it makes you more confident as a person.
Absolutely, because again, that idea, you're maybe reaching that self-esteem, actualization type of level, and yeah, absolutely. Feeling this is going to apply to other things that you do, and I think you and I both experienced that.
Exactly. And one thing that you might realize as you actually start building up this value ladder is that it causes you to see your competition in a way that you hadn't seen it before. If you're simply looking at who your competition is based on the features or attributes that you're offering, you're just going to see it as, you might see your own offering as an hour that a student can spend flying a 172. And if you start looking at who your competition would be there, well, it would really just be other flight schools in your area. Whereas if you start at the value and you're looking at what your competition might be there, you're suddenly looking at all the other things that your student might use to become more confident as a person. And there are a lot of things even outside of flying that they might experience there. I mean, anything from horseback riding to fencing to, I know you do music like me. I mean, taking guitar lessons or learning to play the bass, that can make you a more confident person. So all of a sudden, the types of competitors you have out there has really grown.
Especially in the terms of what probably a lot of our listeners are too, when you're talking about getting those recreational type flyers. Obviously, anything else they could be doing for recreation. So it's really driving into what value does this provide versus those.
Yes,
right?
yes. And that as well speaks to the importance of really honing in on which customers you want to win over. Right. Because getting to the point that you were making, there are a lot of different types or segments of customers who are all taking flight training, but for different reasons. You might have the student who has his eye fixed very firmly on becoming a professional pilot. Or maybe you have professionals like doctors or lawyers who are really interested in the utility that they'll get once they get their pilot certificate. And then you might have the people that just think that it sounds like a lot of fun.
Right.
I know I would categorize myself in that group when I learned how to fly. I was really just looking for the fun involved in it.
Look at us now.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take a look, because I know you've got another set of examples here too, but you're going, this one and the last one we went from features up to value. Can you explain? I know this one we're going to work our way down. Why is that?
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to show with this illustration is while last time we started with the attributes and features that we already had and worked our way up to seeing what the value really was in that, you can also kind of backwards map it and use it in the other direction.
Okay.
Where say that you have a certain segment of customer you want. Well, you can then focus on what you know they would find the most valuable and work backwards. What benefit would you have to implement in order for them to see that value? And then what features and attributes would you need in order for them to get that benefit? So let's look at this example, starting at the value. Maybe you are aiming for those students that are more professionally minded. And if that's the case, a lot of times the greatest value a student's going to see is they want to be able to land that dream job as soon as possible. Maybe it's flying a wide body for the airlines on international flights.
Right.
As soon as they can get there and be captain, that's what they want. So to get there, a higher level benefit might be to minimize the time that they have to spend training. Because the shorter the training period is, the sooner they can start working their way up
getting to that self-actualized dream, right?
Exactly. And so in order to do that, a lower level benefit might be the ability to get their certificates in an accelerated manner. Maybe they want to do an 8 or a 9 day instrument course, or a 3 or a 4 day commercial pilot certificate course. Those things that are really going to get them to the finish line faster.
Right.
And so some features that then you could build in that would be able to get them there would be experienced instructors who are really capable of that kind of fire hose intense teaching. It might be an accelerated curriculum that you build out as opposed to the more traditional Part 61 where you're taking your time going through training. It might be coming up with lodging options for your students or finding ways to subsidize that so that if they are coming from somewhere else in the country, they can spend a week with you, and you've made arrangements for that. It could include a variety of other things. It could even include the weather. Maybe your school is located in a state that has a lot of flyable days.
Right.
That would be a feature that you're able to offer them, less downtime.
That's what I took advantage of when I did my own training. And so what I like what you've done here too is it's that idea of you've targeted in on what it is, what's my goal, my end goal, and then worked your way down and say, what is it that I need to provide so that the folks that I'm trying to get, the customers I'm aiming for, How do I draw them in? So it's really that's basic thing. What do I need to provide to help them reach that goal?
And that's a great summary. I mean, going back to those list of questions that you need to ask in the beginning, the first question on the list was, who are my customers, or who do I want them to be?
Right.
And then from there, what do those customers want and need? And by using this feature benefit value ladder, you can do that in a very practical way. It's an easy thing that you can map on a whiteboard or just using Post-it notes. What value do you want to provide, and how are you going to go about providing that in a practical way?
And then really be able to hone in on what it is you want your business to do.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay. Well, I know that kind of wraps up this session, and I know we're going to do some future sessions too, where we're going to break down and get into some more of how you can find out what it is your customers want. We're looking at, and you want to give us any other previews of things that are coming up?
Right. We've talked about the importance of customer insight, but now we're going to start going into how that can actually be gleaned. And a lot of that is through the process of research. So it's talking to either your current customers or to potential customers.
Right.
Maybe putting together a focus group, conducting some interviews, putting together a survey, coming up with ways that you can find out more about the groups that you're targeting. And then finding ways to effectively communicate with those groups. So those are all things that are going to be coming up on the horizon.
Awesome. I can't wait. And like I said, keep an eye out on Flight School Connectors. We'll be having that ready. And by the way, if there's anything else that you are interested in finding out or that would like us to delve into, please let us know. Just email us at ftinitiative@aopa.org. We want to do what we can to help you out, and that's what we're here for. So just let us know. And in fact, that FT Initiative, like I said, is where Stephen, right behind the camera there, will be seeing those, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. So thanks again for joining us for Flight School Connector, and we will see you next time.